Welcome to Real Talk. My name's Brando, Larice. I am your host. We have a special guest today, Jeff Davison, who is running for mayor of Calgary. Jeff, very great to have you on. I know you have a very busy schedule. We rescheduled a few times, which is okay. Thank you for coming on and thank you for being here.
Thanks very much for having me.
So, I wanted to get started with kind of just a little bit of housing. So, I saw on your website one of your key messages is talking about housing, transit, just the daily costs just rising. What kind of are the biggest challenges driving City of Calgary's just affordability at the moment and housing affordability?
I mean, it is the number one thing across the spectrum of folks in Calgary, right? Like we hear affordability issues from students to seniors, and everybody seems to be aligned that the world's just getting more expensive. And so, what can the city do that's within our means to start supporting Calgarians? I have been a strong proponent of a 4-year tax freeze. I think that gives people predictability and certainty. And, a lot of people will argue, well, that's not possible. It absolutely is possible. And as a former city councillor, I can tell you exactly how we'll do that. And I'm sure we'll get into that in a minute. From a transit perspective, I think, public safety is the biggest thing. I mean, we hear from students just about every day that, it's tough, right? Like, we want people to utilize transit. We want to get our ridership numbers up. But when people don't feel safe, they're just going to find other means, right? And so that doesn't really help solve the problem. And so from a public safety standpoint, transit is a big concern. And yeah, like from a housing standpoint, obviously we have the majority of Calgarians that were opposed to the blanket rezoning. And so I'm committed to rolling that back. But it really does mean, okay, well, what do we do next then, right? Where do we go from here? And, to me, really, when you think about the blanket rezoning, I think there's a couple of problems there. Not to mention that council really came out and sort of had this we know best attitude and went and did it anyway. Number one, we were told it was about affordability. It's not. When the average row house is starting at $700,000 plus, that's not affordable for most people. We were told it was about giving access to community, and so that's why secondary suites were important with a lot of these builds. But we actually have a secondary suite program that I helped put in place in 2018. And so any Calgarian can have a secondary suite in their home if they wanted to now. So that doesn't really solve that problem. And more importantly, when we talk about growth in Calgary, right, we've got about 70,000 people moving to Calgary each and every year. Building 4 units at a time is not keeping up with demand, right? And when we talk about, even from an affordable house standpoint, on average right now, it's taking 8 years to get a building out of the ground. Well, that's a fail, right? We failed to meet our housing commitment. We failed to meet our affordability commitment. So to me, housing and affordability issues that we're seeing right now are actually relatively self-inflicted. So it's about getting time back, right? Right now we know about $120,000 extra is being added to the cost of the average row house right now just because of city delays, right? So when we think about affordability, time becomes one of the biggest things that we can actually invoke as a city. And so how do we get to working with communities so that we understand community development, where we want amenities, what density looks like and where density should make sense for communities, and putting a program together that everybody gets to win.
Thank you. So, kind of just to go off of that, I know it's so much quicker for like the approval process for a single family home rather than if you did a multi-residential or middle housing. That can definitely incur like a lot of the costs and contribute to some of that affordability. Would you be able to just speak on a little bit about that, if kind of how important that is to you, or just how you would try to speed up that process?
I mean, timing is the biggest concern on any development right now, right? I mean, again, go back to if we've got an affordability crisis and we need more affordable homes built, why is it taking 8 years to get a building out of the ground, right? So, like, time is the biggest challenge. And I think that really is a bit of a cultural shift that we'll have with the development department at the City of Calgary. It's really about how do we move faster, right? How do we work with communities better? And how do we build density where density makes sense? I mean, as a former city councillor on the west side, I continue to highlight 3 main projects I brought forward, which was really the idea of taking and building districts within existing districts. So you've got Springbank Hill, you've got West District, you've got the project at Winsport, very much like you're seeing at University District right now. How do we build density where we have large chunks of land within existing districts, right? And put the density where the density makes sense, right? Because then the community gets behind it as well. And so often in these areas, you have diversity of product type, you have parks built in, you have amenities built in, you have 15% off-market housing built in, you've got affordable rentals put in. Like, everything makes sense when you can build in a different way and get moving on those projects. So to date, those projects are largely now 60% complete, and they've been going for about 5 years. So that tells me we can develop differently. And what's important is it's also about keeping up with the growth of Calgary. So to me, those three districts alone will add 55,000 residents to the west side, right? So, okay, well, now we're meeting our housing target. Now we're meeting our commitments to transit. Now we're meeting our commitments to affordability. We have diversity of product type. We partnered with the community to develop what the community wanted, how they wanted to see it, and the amenities they want. It all came together, and it's a brilliant example of we can do better with sites as the city. I mean, transit-oriented development is the biggest opportunity missed, I think, from a city perspective. Where and when we have access to transit, we can build affordability, we can build different communities. Westbrook Station is a great example of one of the most underutilized sites in central Calgary that has access to rail. So it's rethinking how we move the needle on where development makes sense, and it's rethinking the timing that it takes to get those developments going. Because even from an investor standpoint, certainty and security are one of the biggest factors as to why we're seeing delays of investment into large-scale projects here in Calgary.
Thank you for that. I was
I hope
questioning
I'm not
too.
ranting on. You're probably like, can you give
No,
me quicker?
no,
Yeah.
no, it's okay. So I know too, when permits are coming in, rezoning permits, I know there's with the city council meetings, and anyone can speak on those. What kind of feedback have you heard just from the people? What is everyone kind of feeling about more density in their neighborhoods, in their single family neighborhoods? Do they like the idea of certain areas, maybe closer to train stations or whatever it is, having more density, having more multifamily, and kind of just what do you think about that? Like, how could we
Mhm.
talk to the people, talk to them about how development could be done right, and kind of help the private companies get some of their projects out?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think it really depends on where you are. I think every community is different, right? And first of all, I think the diversity of Calgary communities is what makes Calgary great, right? We don't want everything to look the same. We want to have different, experiences downtown as maybe we would have in the Northeast or the Southeast, or like difference is okay, right? So I think it's really about getting back to a more local area plan type mentality, right? Working with the individual communities, not lumping everybody together, and understanding what the individual needs and wants of a community are. And then, translating that through to development in terms of, okay, well, how do we make some of these larger scale projects work, right? We deal a lot with the single family home that comes down to put a new single family home in, or put an R2 in type of thing, and that'll always be. But again, when we're thinking about city building, it's really about how are we keeping up with that pace of growth, right? Since the last election, about 350,000 people have moved to Calgary. It's an incredible amount of people. And so we've got to get pretty targeted about what types of product are they looking at? Where do they want to be? What types of amenities does the community require? And all of the other pieces of infrastructure that the city has to keep up with in order to just meet the demand of where we're seeing people move.
Okay. Well, I did see something about how you want to modernize the public hearing process.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to just speak a little bit about that? What the
Sure.
current process lacks a little bit, and how you could make it better and like more efficient?
Yeah, it was funny because we were talking in a debate, and one of my competitors said, "Well, I didn't see you at the public hearing," and I looked at it and said, "Yeah, you're right, because I run a provincial-wide health charity, deal with cancer patients, 24,000 of them every year. I don't have time to simply waste 4 days in front of city council." So it's thinking about how do we access people better, right? Most people right now, if you think provincially, I believe it's something like 63% of people are $200 away from bankruptcy at all times. $200 away. That means they don't have time, or they can't ask their boss for time off. It means they're working. And it doesn't mean that we should ignore their voices because they can't have access to counsel. And so one of the ways I'm looking at it is, for instance, in healthcare, we have totally modernized virtual care. We have the ability to bring patients in virtually to remove barriers so that they have quality access and timely access to care when and where they need it. Why can't we do the same with the city, right? When we see courtrooms that are doing remote testimonies to protect individuals, when we see boardrooms that have adapted to, post-COVID measures of having collaboration done differently, we can involve bigger conversations when we utilize technology. And so that's one of the things that I want to do with Calgary City Hall chambers is actually modernize them to involve people from a digital perspective, right? That way, you might be able to be at work and you can log on when your time comes up and you get your 5 minutes with council rather than have to come down to City Hall, wait in front of a crowd. Often there are many delays when it comes to public hearings. We can do better to allow people better access to their city council.
I do like that a lot. I know there is just governments, federal, municipal, provincial, there are still a lot of just outdated things. I know me personally, like There's been some rezoning projects. Like in my neighborhood, I could speak out. Personally, I didn't have a problem with it, so I never did. And something I think is, a lot of the people that do speak out are probably people who are more likely against the project than for the project. I think and a lot of people just don't know. Is there something that you could do to kind of get people, because I know if everyone that's at the meeting is mostly speaking out against it, it could really hurt the project and the timeline for it. Is there anything kind of you'd do to try to promote people coming in to help support more projects?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I disagree with that statement. I think it's, often it comes down to people are busy, right?
Yeah.
Students are focused on, education. Folks are focused on their families. People are challenged to get time off of work. Seniors don't want to travel downtown. So I don't think it's a statement of, people who just only come out to be, unsupportive of a project. I think a lot of the people that are supportive of projects, they'll write letters and they'll include those letters to council. I think it's also about looking at how do we give better access to city councilors, right? I mean, I can tell you as a former city councilor, it was challenging for people to come meet me at my office downtown. And so often you'd be having coffee meetings out in the community. And so one of the other things we're looking at is how can we create satellite offices in community halls, for instance, so that councilors can provide more access to themselves for the public, right? And I think it's really part and parcel of how do we really rebuild trust with Calgarians.
Thank you for that. Well, I'm just going to move on because I did forget to speak about this part. But so I know you've been a former city councilor.
Mm-hmm.
You are currently CEO of the Prostate Cancer Center, and then you also have had experience in the business, tech, and energy center. What made you want to run for the big seat as mayor?
It's interesting because we talk a lot about the issues at the city, right? We talk a lot about how the blanket rezoning has had a negative impact. We talk a lot about public safety. We talk a lot about affordability. But the election really comes down to experience, leadership, and vision, right? I mean, where are we going as a city? Who has the right experience to lead, and who's the right type of leader to do it? And that's really what brought me back. I mean, 4 years later, I look at just how off track the city has gotten and how angry citizens have become with city council. And it really shouldn't work that way, right? We should be there on behalf of the Calgarians who've elected us to say, here's what we're going to do. And Calgarians should have predictability in what city council is doing as well, right? I think from the last election, from an arena deal that got canceled, which I worked very hard on capping our investment and signing a deal with the Flames that got all of our money back, to bag bylaws, to blanket rezonings, to climate emergencies. I think a lot of Calgarians just were scratching their heads saying, this isn't what anybody campaigned on, yet here we are. And so that trust got broken. And I started thinking about it from the perspective of, I've been sitting on the board of governors at the University of Calgary for 4 years. I've got 3 young people in my own home that I care about. And I started to kind of get back to the idea that it's like we don't have a vision in this city anymore. Where are we going? And to me, it was really about how do we get back to being a safe, affordable place of opportunity for everybody, right? Calgary is the home of opportunity. It doesn't matter where you came from in the world, whether you're born and raised here, chances are your parents came from somewhere. And all those people that are moving here move here for one reason, opportunity. Right? We are the entrepreneurial city of the world. We have a get it done attitude. And I can tell you, running a charity, raising money in Calgary every single day is so different than anywhere else, right? People genuinely care to give back to their community here and want to step up and help in any way you ask them. And that's unique, and we're losing that spirit because Calgarians are getting lost. And so to me, it was, how do we bring back that spirit of Calgary? How do we bring back that entrepreneurialism and that get it done attitude and really move forward with the vision that we can be a safer, more affordable place of opportunity for everyone? And that was really what got me back into the game.
That's awesome. How was your experience with Calgary growing up? What are kind of like some of your personal values and some of the things you kind of just absolutely love to do and care about?
Yeah, I mean, I am born and raised here in Calgary. I mean, I think the interesting thing is that it doesn't really give me any special privilege or anything. I think it's a different perspective seeing Calgary when I was a kid be sort of that small prairie town now turned into an international hub, right? And so, when I was growing up, I think there was 225,000 people in Calgary. We're now a city of nearly 1.8 million. It's incredible to see the diversity of Calgary change. And I think that's the greatest thing about Calgary. I think, our diversity is our strength in Calgary. And so, keeping our status as a place of attraction around the world where people do see opportunity is incredibly important to me. Growing up here, I had lots of opportunities to do things that I never would have thought. I mean, I spent, 20 years in energy and technology, and, I've been a filmmaker. I have sat on city council. I'm running one of the most successful health charities in the province. It's an incredible place to be. When I look at my 3 kids, and all the young people that want to be in Calgary, that have come to Calgary, we want to keep them here, right? Because when we see young people leave Calgary, it means the next generation of brain power is gone, right? And we want those people here. We want them to help innovate and move Calgary forward. Calgary can and always has been a place where we solve big problems, and I want to continue that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm actually personally from Ontario. I moved out here for university. I actually lived out here during COVID for a bit, and I was like, hey, this is truly amazing city. I absolutely love the atmosphere. I saw there was so much opportunity. Everyone I met was just so friendly. It was pretty amazing. I love how like Calgary just is like such a leader in just in real estate in general. I know just there's a lot of definitely startup companies and tech companies that are there. You have that parking garage in front of the library, it's called Elevation, I think.
Platform Calgary.
Platform Calgary, yes. And they have kind of like that entrepreneurial
I helped start
center.
that building.
Sorry?
I helped start that building.
Oh, really? That's awesome. So I heard with that building was originally built as obviously a parking garage, but could be converted into an office space. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, it was really about, how do we convert the building later, right? I mean, at the time, I helped champion the downtown strategy, which is now seeing a lot of those office to residential conversions work. And so Platform was a great example of where we stood back and we said, look, if we're endeavoring on this whole idea of can we make office to residential work down the road, why are we not building our own city assets to be more adaptable to that in the future? And so Platform was a great example of where we took that experiment and put it into action.
Yeah, when I heard about that in one of my classes, and I was like in awe. I was like, that's so cool.
It was a challenging site just because, you've got the LRT underground there. You've got, when we think about really a lot of the challenge with the office to residential conversions, you've got a lot of those old 70s post-tension construction buildings, right? And a lot of them, as much as we may want to renovate and create a different use for, it's just not possible, right? The buildings are not structurally where they need to be in order to make that happen. And so Platform's building was really the idea of if we set it up from the beginning properly, down the road, whether that's 30 or 50 years later, could that be adapted into residential from a commercial opportunity?
Moving on to the Green Line. I know there's been a lot of challenges with that.
I'll say.
Yeah. You've probably been asked a lot about this question, but kind of as far as I understand, I know there's been a lot of challenges with it. There's a plan originally going all the way north down to the south. I know there were some communities that were kind of built completely with that in mind in the north. There's a lot of townhouse projects and stuff, so there's limited parking. And they're already built, so there's a lot of challenges with that. I think, especially with people trying to get around the city. What do you think you could bring to the table to kind of get that project up faster, or what you think that you could bring to the table?
When I was on council, we put 17 recommendations forward. I was one of the city councillors who stood up and formed the Green Line Assessment Committee because I didn't believe that, 10 years into the project, there was any rigor on the project, and we really needed to bring in some experts. Council is not the expert on building the largest infrastructure project in our city's history, right? We have those smart minds here that we need to tap into. And so standing up the Green Line Assessment Committee was really the first phase of, okay, how do we put some adult supervision in charge of this, for lack of a better term. So what that got us was, a rehashed plan, right? We had been talking about really a capital plan that 10 years later did not account for inflation. It did not really move the needle on ridership. COVID interrupted a whole bunch of things. And so we really needed to think about how do we strategize where Green Line goes. And along in that story, the vision of Green Line changed a few times, right? And I think that really was the problem as to why we've seen a bit of disconnection in terms of where the project is today. Right now, we're focused on phase one, which has always been sort of designed as the event center south, right? The idea of getting into the Beltline. And then phase two would really be how do we get into the downtown? Phase three would then be how do you get north? With cost escalations now, post-COVID, with tariffs, with inflation, just you name it, we're now seeing the cost of just the event center south move to about $6.8 billion. My job is to ensure we get that done on time and on budget, right? And I think what will happen is as we kind of move the needle on, getting tracks laid, which, we've got so-called shovels in the ground, but we really, we're now 15 years into a project that hasn't seen one piece of track laid down. We've got to get going on this, right? Time is again the enemy on this. And the more time that happens, the more challenges and cost pressures that we're going to see. We've got to do our best to rebuild a relationship with both the provincial and federal government. Currently got multi levels of government fighting about, the realignment of how we're getting into the downtown. I can tell you we've done this work. We understand where the alignment should be. I'm a huge proponent of going cut and cover through the downtown core, not deep tunneling. That's too risky. And risky from the sense that I spent 15 years in exploration. I understand how fluid the downtown is here and how different the lithology of downtown is in Calgary. Deep tunneling is not something we want to gamble with, but cut and cover is, right? Because I don't think we should make the mistakes of running a train at grade through the downtown like we did on 7th Avenue. So all those things aside, part of the early negotiation of phase two is, how are we going to get it back into the downtown? Remember, we've had billions of dollars invested in our downtown on Second Street's alignment. That is now being compromised because, we've got different levels of government fighting with other levels of government about where this thing should go. It really is getting everybody structured back to a plan, reminding everybody what the vision of this was, which was a north-south line, and putting together a plan that can ultimately look at how do we provide the capital through multiple orders of government, how do we provide the investor confidence that we are going to do what we said we're going to do, and how do we give confidence back to Calgarians who've been demanding a transit project like this for 15 years, in particular to those communities like in Ward 3 where that whole community was built on the premise that they could be a transit-oriented community, and to date have not had any sufficient transit built into their community.
So regarding that, just that last part there, just Ward 3, how could we address some of those issues for some of the communities that have been built just based off of, Green Line's potentially going to be here, they have limited parking, there's going to be just a lot of issues with transportation. What would you do to address that?
I think there's a lot of different options we're going to have to look at. I mean, there's obviously moving the blue line west, and can we look at, skirting over from an airport station? Do we relook at sort of downtown to Ward 3 where originally it followed the Deerfoot rail corridor? Are we sufficiently supplying BRT? But I think it really does come back to an overall area structure plan that we need to relook at. There's, lots of available land there where I think the original vision was almost a Quarry Park up in the north, a secondary downtown almost, if you will. And that none of that vision has happened. I mean, to date, we just have massive tracts of open land that there was a lot of promises made on that never got delivered. And so I think it's day one, working with the new city councillor there and working with the community to understand that, is this project possible? And if it is, how do we get moving on it quickly? How do we ensure that, the folks that now live there and call Ward 3 home, how do we get back to fulfilling the promises that were made, well over a decade ago about public transportation in their area and providing better access to them?
So kind of going off that just a little bit. So for some of the young Calgarians that are, who feel just a little bit more disconnected from some of the local politics, just knowing just for the Green Line, for density, or affordability and all of that. What would you do to kind of keep everyone engaged, keep everyone engaged in just with shaping Calgary and their community?
I've been super fortunate on this campaign. I think half the Dinos basketball team is on our campaign. And I mean, it's been amazing having so many university students get involved. But that is the message, get involved. This is your city. I mean, when we talk about city building, there's a lot of reactive fixes we need to make for today. I get all of that. But it really is the city we're building for you, young people. And you need to have a seat at the table in order to build the city that you want to see later in life. And that starts now. And so, as much as I think young people often feel like they're left out of the conversation, I'm giving you the entry point to the conversation. I want you at the table. I want you to help shape what the future of Calgary looks like, because this is your city. You're going to inherit everything this city council is going to do. So let's work together to make sure it's something you want and something we're all driving towards.
Thank you. And finally, I know you were saying the tax-free for a few years. I am questioning too, for the all these projects that we have, the infrastructure, the green line, how could we do that? How could we afford it? How could we get the money
Yep.
to do all these projects and keep Calgary growing?
So the tax base supports our operating costs at the city, right? So remember, Calgary is a capital-rich city, and we're operating poor to an extent, right? So the property taxes you're paying, and to be clear, I want students to understand too. I hear a lot from young people. They say, "Well, I don't pay property taxes, so I don't care." You do pay property taxes. It's called rent, right? Every time your building property taxes go up, your landlord doesn't pay that. They pass the buck on to you, right? So everybody does pay property tax. That goes to supporting our operational budgets at the city, right? Not the capital budget. So when we think about the new buildings going in, when we think about interchanges, whatever we're talking about, that's all the capital side. On the operating cost side, there's a lot we can do to create a 4-year tax freeze. Number one, build more tax base. So when we talk about timing, incredibly important to the situation of freezing taxes is building faster, because the more buildings we can get in, the more types of communities we can build, the more transit-oriented development we build. That builds tax space, and that offsets the tax rate. We've also got an industrial land strategy. Remember that Calgary has about 4,000 acres of available industrial land. There's a huge demand on land, and currently, I think, the good people of Balzac feel like Calgary's doing God's work for them, because our ability to not move the needle on getting projects done quickly means they're going to other jurisdictions. And they're not going there because the tax base is cheaper. They're going there because the timing is there, right? And so we need to work pretty hard about ensuring that we keep that tax base inside the city to ensure that our tax freeze is possible. It's also about managing our investment income differently, right? And so, predictability and certainty into our investment income. This year, the city of Calgary had a $220 million surplus in the first 6 months of the year. That's the equivalent of a 12% property tax reduction. So it tells me we can manage our investment income differently. And remember, we're dealing with about $7 and $8 billion worth of investment income. I know how to manage money to make it work for us rather than us work for our money. On top of that, we're going to change our risk profiling, right? So the idea of risk and assessment has a huge impact on how operational budgets can happen. We're going to reevaluate all of those. This is not something that I think is mythical. This is responsible. Calgarians have told us the number one issue right now is affordability. And I'll tell you, after running a provincial-wide health charity, I know how to make dollars work, and I know how to increase programming based on it. I've done that for the last 4 years, and that's exactly what I intend to do with the city.
What's the difference if we were to just cut a lot of the city fees for development permits, all the permits, demolition permit, all of that, just property taxes, maybe just for the rezoning permit process, construction, and then kind of start it back, and then start the property taxes again once the property's up?
Well, I think it's, cutting is a dangerous word, right? Because Calgarians do expect services, and we do have a lot of infrastructure issues that we need to work our way through, right? I mean, we do have we've got about $15 billion worth of investment pending in the city. We've got about a $7 billion infrastructure deficit, right? So we need to be careful about talking about cuts when cuts really isn't what Calgarians are asking for. They're asking to do better with the dollars that they give us, right? And so to me, it's about refocusing on core infrastructure and getting back to basics. I don't think that the average person developing in our city will tell you that fees are the problem. Time is the problem, right? People will pay fees. People will look at where investment makes sense, but the city's killing development on timing, right? And that's where I think the frustration point has come, where we're not keeping up with the demand. We're not keeping up with the 70,000 people moving here, all through timing purposes, right? That's what's really got to change, because by way of a lack of timing and focus on how we move the needle on development, we have put ourselves into a self-inflicted housing crisis. We have put ourselves into a self-inflicted affordability crisis. And time is what will change all of that.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. I think that's kind of all the time that we have today.
Thank you for having me.
I do really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you so much. I know you have a really busy schedule. I'll try to get this posted sooner than later, but
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time, and
Thank
good
you.
luck for the rest of the election.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.